The dusty road to the abandoned hostel stretched endlessly, a thin, pale line slicing through the mist-covered trees. Alex, Max, Jenna, and Chris had ventured here after hearing rumors of its haunted past. Every local had a different tale, but all were marked by the same horror, a group of teens trapped in a fire, never found. Their spirits were said to linger, waiting for new arrivals. The night was unforgiving, and as they approached the derelict building, an eerie silence engulfed them. The hostel loomed ahead, its walls charred black, skeletal against the moonlit sky. Windows were shattered, gaping open like silent screams. A gust of wind blew through the trees, whispering unintelligible words. "Should we go in?" Jenna whispered, gripping her flashlight. "Only if you don't want to be called a coward," Chris grinned, pushing the creaking door open. They stepped inside. The stale, cold air immediately weighed on them. Dust covered everything, and shadows seemed to move in the corners of their eyes. Max held up his phone, snapping pictures for his urban exploration blog. The flash illuminated the peeling wallpaper and strange stains on the floor. "So, this is where the teens supposedly burned to death?" Max asked, keeping his voice low. "Yeah, in the common room," Alex replied, pointing to the left. Apparently they were trapped, and the fire spread so fast they had no way out. The group exchanged uneasy glances before moving toward the common room. As they entered, a chill ran down Jenna's spine. The room was filled with overturned chairs, and the faint, acrid scent of burned wood still hung in the air. Suddenly, Jenna felt a cold touch on her shoulder. She gasped, spinning around, but saw only shadows. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, clutching Chris's arm. He shook his head, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. "Let's keep going," he muttered, swallowing hard. They moved through the hallways, each step echoing in the hollow silence. Doors hung off their hinges, revealing rooms coated in dust and decay. Suddenly, they heard a faint, rhythmic tapping. Alex shone his flashlight down the hallway but saw nothing. "It's just the building settling," he muttered, trying to convince himself. The tapping grew louder and they realized it wasn't random. It was like footsteps, growing closer with every second. Heartbeats racing, they pushed forward, finding themselves in a staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. "I didn't know there was a basement," Chris said, peering down. "Neither did I," Jenna whispered, a sinking feeling in her gut. They took the stairs cautiously, the air growing colder with each step. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a large room, walls lined with old lockers and shelves, filled with odd, dusty trinkets. The center of the room held a massive iron furnace, its door slightly ajar. "Maybe this is where they tried to keep warm that night," Max suggested, his voice trembling. Jenna glanced nervously around the room, her flashlight flickering. The shadows seemed to shift, as though something was watching from the corners. Suddenly, the furnace door creaked open, releasing a thick, acrid smoke that quickly filled the room. Jenna coughed, covering her mouth. "We should leave," she choked, pulling at Chris's arm. But the door they'd entered from had disappeared into the shadows, and no matter how they tried, they couldn't find it. They were trapped. A distant voice broke through the silence, low and pained. "You shouldn't have come!" Jenna's heart hammered. The voice sounded impossibly close, whispering directly into her ear. She spun around, but no one was there. Suddenly, her flashlight illuminated a figure, a boy, his face horribly burned, skin melted into grotesque shapes. His hollow eyes stared into hers with a mix of rage and despair. She screamed, stumbling back. The others looked at her, confused. "What is it?" Chris asked, panic evident in his voice. But before Jenna could answer, more figures began to emerge from the shadows. They were all teenagers, faces charred, bodies disfigured and broken. Their eyes glowed with a strange, otherworldly fire as they stepped closer, closing in on the group. "Help! Us!" they chanted in unison, their voices hollow and haunting. The friends backed away, but the room had no escape. The figures closed in, their hands reaching out, cold and desperate. Chris screamed as one of them brushed his arm, leaving a searing burn on his skin. The others tried to pull him away, but the ghosts were relentless, their fingers gripping tightly. "Why are you doing this?" Max shouted, panic twisting his voice. One of the burned figures stepped forward, a girl with hair burned away, her face barely recognizable. "They left us to die," she whispered, her voice cracking with grief. "You have to feel what we felt." The walls began to melt, the room filling with an unbearable heat as flames seemed to fly.